Van Nistelrooy era Filbert way has begun, with 4 points from the Dutchman's first 2 games, with an impressive 3-1 victory over West Ham, and last weekend a last gasp dramatic 2-2 draw with high-flying Brighton and Albion. Today I'll be zooming in on last weekend's encounter with the Seagulls, but if you want to check out my previous video that details the West Ham performance and his PSV side, and Ruud Van Nistelrooy himself, feel free to skate over there on my channel. But if you're here to stay, we're going to look at how he lined up compared to his previous matchup, the tactical takeaways, key performers, what LCFC did well, what they aren't doing well, and Ruud's potential best lineup at the moment and how high the Foxes can fly in the Premier League this season. Last time out against West Ham, this is how they set up. Tactically with the ball, the left midfielder drifted in as a 10 as the left back held width and pushed up, with the right back making a 3 in the back line. Off the ball, it was a compact 4-4-2. Today was no different, however, facundo buonanotte was unavailable to face his parent club, so Jordan Ayew came in for the young Argentine, as he was the man on the left as Bilal El Chanous played as a 10, where Ruud Van Nistelrooy tweaked him at half-time against West Ham, meaning it was the young Moroccan and veteran striker Jamie Vardy leading the press off the ball. Same dynamics, mostly the same players. Now let's hop straight into the game. Now tactically in the opening 15 minutes it was clear to identify Leicester were much better in structure, understandably, considering Van Nistelrooy only had 2 training sessions before the West Ham game. They shaped in their usual 4-4-2 out of possession, but a little bit deeper this time out, staying compact, overloading the central space, making it tight for any player to pass through the crowded space. Leicester were also looking to be more intense compared to West Ham in wide areas, as they were aggressive and doubled up whenever Brighton tried to play it down the flank. So Leicester forced Brighton back, forcing the likes of Verbruggen and Lewis Dunk to force it long and direct in their attempts of reducing the passing options for anybody with the ball. Whenever a Brighton player did get the ball, such as Carlos Baleba, a blue shirt would pounce, jump in and block the passing option that was forwards, clearly intended to block Brighton's free-flowing passing nature and limit them to what they can do with their short passing. Their pressing was well coordinated on goal kicks too, as Brighton were on the brink of losing possession a fair few times. But on the ball we saw Leicester set up in the famous 3-2-5 shape that we see all across Europe, Soumaré and Didi as the number 6s and Ayew and Bilal as the number 10s. In this game, Leicester were much more comfortable with the ball. They kept it for longer. Areas of the game they were in control, they were relaxed, which was a huge progression in comparison to the West Ham game, when they were completely ineffective if it wasn't a counter-attack, so this was good to see. I found in the first half one of the most noticeable tactical details was the minimalisation of Carlos Baleba, Brighton's defensive midfielder, a player who's a monster, can carry it forward and pass it forward so fast and so well whilst being an absolute engine. A huge influence in the Brighton side was ultimately limited in this game. The 2 leading the press, Bilal and Vardy, stayed close to him, and Soumaré was ready to jump in whenever he got the ball, which meant most of his passes were sideways, and when the Frenchman did press higher, the wingers in Ayew and McAteer came more narrow, making up for the space, almost making a 3 with Wilfred and Didi. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows from a Leicester City perspective, because Brighton were finding ways in, despite a more solid defensive display so far. They made attacking inroads from these moves: long switches to the opposite flank, where the wide player is isolated, quick transitions beating LCFC in pace and intensity, and long direct balls to their front men. West Ham last game were finding success in longer balls to their wide men from one side to the other, so this isn't anything new, but this is also where the goal had come from. Diagonal pass from Baleba finds Espiotanan, bombing down this flank quickly with time and space to find a cross where Lamptey picks up the ball and hits an unstoppable effort right into the corner of the net. Now a great goal, but Leicester need to do a better job in not completely neglecting the opposite flank, because it makes the long switch such an easy breakaway and outlet for the opponents. and Ayew needs to do better in closing Lamptey down. Leicester are forced back here and defending extremely deep, meaning Brighton can pour numbers forward, so even if Lamptey didn't shoot, they'd still have a lot of numbers forward to penetrate Leicester with. A recurring theme in the first 45. Now the first half wasn't bad at all. They won the ball high often but didn't have the quality or attacking fluidity to make Brighton pay at all. Jordan Ayew was also having a poor half. For me, I was looking forward to Ayew's impact. Leicester versus West Ham, they hit it long due to being pressed and lacking solutions with the ball, yet had no aerial outlet to win it. But Ayew brings that, as well as his hold-up play and consuming opponents in the meantime, which he did do, just poorly, taking far too many touches, letting Lamptey swoop in swiftly, and before you know it, he's off with his blistering pace. Now Brighton were in control, but not completely comfortable. Leicester needed to make their high turnovers count, but also just put more numbers in the attacking box, because when they did, Christensen had somebody to cross to, and Justin had nearly equalised with a header. Some of the key performers were Boubakary Soumaré and Bilal El-Chanouz once again. Soumaré had a big performance in his last game against West Ham, but he was secure with the ball, covered the yards well out of possession and passed it forwards pretty well, while El-Chanouz brought so much energy to Leicester in build-up. We can see here he drops in, makes himself a passing option to Hermansen, knocks the ball to Justin before making himself another passing option to Justin, with his sheer fitness and eagerness for his team really helping Leicester out here. This could be something we see more of, as him and Buonanotte are great at roaming around unmarked and taking the ball on the turn and carrying it forwards. Second half began and Baleba was off, who apart from the goal with his long pass, struggled to make an impact with a yellow card to his name too, so Leicester did their job in containing it. The first 10 to 15 minutes of the second 45 were completely Leicester's, dominating, putting more men forward whilst passing the ball around confidently with the crowd behind them. Now we see in the early minutes a situation of Soumaré passing it forwards into Ayew, who finally takes less touches, using his body well, turns brilliantly with the opportunity to drive it forwards with intensity. Yet he turns back and slows the play down completely. Infuriating watch. But then a few minutes later, the exact same sequence repeats again. He turns, he beats Rutter physically, drives it forwards, and then does the right thing and finally plays it forwards. We need to see more of this from Jordan Ayew. It's where he can be effective. In the final third too, of course, but not just being a super sub, but making an impact from minute one and finding consistency. Another move from the early minutes of the second half saw Boubakary Soumaré taking Brighton on a stroll with a nutmeg in a tight space, a pass forwards intensely before receiving it back as Leicester took it forwards before they work it to the final third. Ultimately, Leicester were finding fluidity and breaking down Brighton, but a lot of moves broke down due to Casey McAteer, someone who works very hard covering a lot of distance and put in a great shift off the ball against West Ham, but is very inexperienced, raw and lacking quality in decision making, because on a better day, Leicester would have scored in this half early. Ruud made some subs in the game early, bringing on Oliver Skipp for the injured Wilfred Ndidi, then Decordova-Reid and Mavididi for Ayew and McAteer. Now, as much as Leicester was so much more fluid in their play with more men forward and moving around proactively, you unfortunately run the risk of counters, something Brighton were very strong in, which is how they scored their second goal. Leicester lost control, Brighton won it, and a nice ball arrives to the fresh sub in Yakuba Minteh, who runs at Christensen with tease and excellence before placing it into the corner of the net, whilst the centre-back Yannick Vestergaard is jogging back and exposed. The risk you ultimately run with playing high and aggressively. Vestergaard at left centre-back is great on the ball. He's a good forward passer and shares good intelligence in timing a pass with opponents pressing him. But in a wide area, he will never recover from a turnover quickly, which is why he needs to be utilised in the middle of the three, or at right centre-back as you could say, as he is much stronger here and less exposed. As the game looks dead and buried, the Foxes were still going. Soumaré and Skipp were pulling the strings, Christensen was intense, and Mavididi was really running at his man and looking dangerous. Leicester's first goal was fantastic from Oliver Skip. A nice direct pass into the feet of Reed, who gets a bit of luck with his pass to Vardy, but it's put into a great space and Vardy is unmarked with Christensen and puts it away nicely, capitalising on Brighton's complacency. Now after that, Brighton were there for the taking. The crowd was up, Brighton were rattled, shaky and struggling to find a way out, to which is exactly what happened for their goal. The Brazilian runs straight into danger where yellow shirts are completely passive, switching off as Mavididi, who was very intense coming onto the pitch, closed down the space well. Vardy makes a perfect run with Van Heck being too consumed at Mavididi running at him. He didn't even notice Vardy is running away. Mavididi finds him and Vardy has the composure, coolness and control to set up Reed for the equaliser. And for as long as Vardy put it into that space, a blue shirt would get there, with Daka, Mavididi and Reed overloading that area. A great comeback from the Foxes, but Ruud's side showed the character and determination that you need to see in a side near the bottom, because any side in the league can be in the position Brighton were in and fumble a lead just like that. No game's over until the final whistle. And Leicester once again capitalised on the complacency of the opposition, just like against West Ham. Leicester was so much more dangerous, fluid and overall better when they committed more men forward, which they need to do to win games. We spoke about the attacking attempt against West Ham being clear with the amount of players they poured into the box towards the end. We saw that again against the Seagulls with the final goal. It's just that consistency and decision making in the final third that they need to make count. Top performers today were for me the obvious Jamie Vardy, Boubakary Soumaré, Oliver Skip and El Chanous. With Soumaré and Ndidi out for the Newcastle game, it's the perfect chance for Skip to make his mark on the team. But Soumaré for me was everywhere and everything good about Leicester last Sunday. In the closing minutes of the game, he dribbled past a crowd of Brighton players and won a free kick, which was the perfect embodiment of his performance and summed it up brilliantly, as he completely relieved the pressure of Leicester possibly losing, but giving it in their hands to snatch the win. His ball carrying and forward passing, top. Positioning and defensive recoveries, top, and saved Vestergaard a few times. His work rate and high pressing, absolutely top. He pressed much higher in the second half as LCFC were much more aggressive, but he still recovered well when needed, and in duels showed his strength and physicality so well. In the future, I'd like to see Ruud try this. Vestergaard centrally in his favoured role, less exposed. Justin pushing up to allow Buonanotte onto the right half space, and the work rate and hard yards of Casey McAteer, whilst being able to cut in on his right foot, works well in this Leicester City system, as Leicester need players to help that defence out in transition, because it's slow and doesn't recover distance fast enough. So that leaves Leicester City in a solid 16th place position, level on points with Everton, and that poses the question, what can Leicester City achieve this season? Well, many would lazily say that their squad is poor and they won't stay up, but people that actually watch Leicester City would say their defence is poor, but the rest of the squad is good. I mentioned in the previous video that Leicester conceded so many shots due to the quality and combinations to the defence, but the rest of the team is very decent. The core is strong, the attack is bright and has a lot to show for it. Leicester have scored more goals than Manchester United, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle United and most of the bottom half. The attack and midfield is simply more than good enough to keep Leicester City up. It's the defensive weakness that lets them down. So recruitment in January is needed in a centre-back and definitely a right-back. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to smash a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. If you want to check out my last video where I detailed his PSV side and the performance against West Ham, check it out. And I'll see you guys in the next one.